Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. What did peasants eat in medieval times? What did rich people eat in medieval times?
Today we are looking at high status food. Duke, Earl, maybe not king, but very, very high status. Would it be food fit for a king, this?
It might well be, yes.
I know we also have totally different type of plates. This
Ooh,
square
that's
plate,
good.
that seems kind of unusual. What's that?
Your square plate is your trencher. Basically, it represents your piece of bread that you had in earlier episodes.
Right.
Your piece of bread, because you are now so high status,
Guys, let me
has
go
become
turn on
a
the light
square pewter
quick.
plate.
That's better. Okay.
How
So
interesting.
you would probably still have trencher bread, but at this sort of level, it was considered bad form to eat bread.
Right, because the bread was peasant food.
Well,
or
the bread was collected at the end of the meal into a huge bowl and was given as alms to the poor.
oh, so it was charity.
Yes.
To not eat the bread was charity as well, and
Yes.
you probably didn't like it anyway. You'd had plenty of the other food. We have a goblet there and red wine.
Red wine, this one is called Hippocras, and this is a red spiced wine. It's basically medieval mulled wine.
Fantastic. Would that be warm?
It could be warm or it could be drunk cold.
And we have bread, and this is represented by little rolls, I
Yes,
suppose.
these are manchet bread rolls, and this is an enriched dough. So this bread has melted butter in it, as well as all the flour, water and yeast that other bread would have.
Is there a modern bread that you could compare it to? Not brioche or
I
anything
suppose,
like
yes,
that?
brioche is
Sweetened?
probably the closest thing.
Right, it's a bit sort of
these are not.
cakey-ish.
Yes, yes.
Why is there a custard tart
What is a
on my
brioche?
plate as a duke?
Well, because it's as we've said before, you don't have courses, you have a remove,
Right.
and this is part of your remove.
So is that a custard?
that is a custard tart, and it is that beautiful golden yellow colour because it is coloured with saffron.
Saffron today is expensive.
Yes.
Was it equally expensive?
Saffron has always been more expensive than gold. Yes.
And back then it would have been, and that bright colour would have been an important part of the display of,
Yes.
of the cooking.
Yes.
And a chicken?
You have a chicken. Eating chicken is something that we take for granted these days. Certainly in the post-war period, chicken has become a very, very cheap food. It is basically the food of the masses.
Right.
In medieval times, actually eating a chicken was it was killing part of your valuable livestock. You might eat a chicken
the eggs.
when it had stopped laying.
Right.
You may eat a capon, which is a male chicken, a cockerel.
I wonder-
But to actually eat
Cockerel. I wonder how many eggs your average chicken lays in its lifetime. Like if if you get one like young female chicken or whatever egg laying age, and it lasts until old, like it would. I wonder how many eggs it would produce.
eat a laying bird, so thus removing part of your subsidiary food source,
The eggs.
the
yeah.
eggs, was ridiculously extravagant.
So this is extremely extravagant. This is saying I don't need to worry about.
Right. That's like saying, hey, look at this chicken right here. I'm so rich, I don't even need the eggs. I'm just gonna eat it.
Supply of eggs because I'm so wealthy I can get more.
Yes,
This is this.
This is venison.
This is venison. So the meat from a deer.
yes.
And this would have been hunted, would it
it would-
by me potentially and my colleagues?
Very likely hunted on your own land. The chase and the hunt was a very important part of noble social life in the Middle Ages.
So you'd hunt. That was a part of the whole thing, and then you would eat what
Yes.
you killed.
Yes.
As well, which I suppose is a good thing.
It is, and again, no part of this would be wasted. You would divide up the cuts of meat according to the status of the people around you. So the prime cuts would go to your ducal table, whereas the sort of subsidiary cuts would be passed to people lower down, until the very lowly retainers in your house might get what are known as the umbles.
Umbles being...
As in eating humble pie. It comes from the innards of the deer.
So the guts, basically, those wouldn't have been thrown away.
No.
They'd have been used.
They would have been chopped up and cooked in a pie.
And you haven't got humble pie.
I took pity on you and decided not to do your
No
humble pie.
humble pie this time. Fantastic. Now, there's a bowl of water here as well.
That's where that
we were talking about not using the left hand and wiping your hand on the napkin. We've got a napkin here still. What's the bowl of water for?
Because when you enter the room or before you sit to eat, your hands would be washed.
You washed for you, so you'd hold...
Yeah, you would hold your hands over the bowl and somebody would pour perfumed water over your hands to clean them, and you'd then be given a towel to dry them on before you sat at the table.
And so that was sort of part of the medieval hygiene, but you still presumably wouldn't use your left hand?
Absolutely not.
Not at all. So all of this stuff is fit for a duke or even a king.
Yes.
So shall I try some of the venison?
Absolutely.
The venison is fried.
It's being pan fried with spices and onions and leeks.
Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm worried about. I use a spoon. I'm worried about etiquette. This is ridiculous.
That's fine.
And I shall. Spices again. Are they? I can taste the leeks as well. Are the spices similar to the stuff we've seen before?
Yes, they are.
There's a lot of meat there.
There is.
I would like some,
And
sir.
shall I have some of the custard
You could.
with it? Would that be?
That would be very medieval.
Would I cut it in any particular?
No, you can just cut it.
Cut a piece off.
And again, I've taken pity on you and made good pastry.
I'm going to use hands because custard pie and venison go well together. I think they should sell these in shops. It's rather good. I like it.
Okay.
The spicy meat and the sweetness actually it's quite a good combination.
Yes, and the custard, it's quite bland. It's not a flavoured custard. So this sort of level, there isn't quite so much of a need to show off.
Because I'm already established.
Yes.
Therefore.
Yeah. So, if you were having lots of important people for dinner, you would up the spices. But if it's just you and your household, then you don't need to show off quite so much.
I've never had custard tart and meat before. It's great. Oh, wrong hand. Oh, Lord. No, I'm all right. I'm the Duke. I'm allowed to do that. I'll just be slightly outraging my fellow diners.
But that's all right, because if you are a Duke, you've probably got a man to wipe your bottom for you.
Oh, okay. So it's the poop hand. Gotcha.
But that's all right, because if
So is that also the hand used to
you are a Duke, you've probably got a man to wipe your bottom for you.
Yes, right. Gentleman of the stool.
Absolutely.
Very, very important job because you're in private with a powerful man who normally would be surrounded by everybody. So probably the only time in his life.
honestly, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Is there a better job to get to know an important person than wiping their ass for them? Like, you're getting in very intimate areas, probably touching the balls and. So, sir, there's an opening, huh? You need a new squire, or I don't know.
Would be when he was almost on his own.
Yes.
He had a chance to sit there
Quietly.
in
Contemplation.
Wonderful.
Guys, I'm looking for a butthole wiper out there if anyone wants to apply.
Yes.
Chicken as well.
Yeah.
Position is open.
Would I just cut it myself, or would it be served to me?
Oh
do
no,
you think?
you would have a man especially to cut,
Probably on the other side of the table, I
Yes.
presume.
Yes,
And I
he
would
would.
say some of that.
who would carve your chicken
some
for
of that.
you. Excuse my left hand. This chicken has been cooked in stock, and it's stuffed with grapes.
Right. Is this spiced as well? Or
No, it's
this is
not.
just...
If I just open him up, see, inside we've got some grapes and some herbs.
Wonderful.
Especially with like cow meat, like steak. I would really, yes, I would like a little salt. Would I prefer a perfectly seasoned steak? Of course. But you could not season a steak 1 ounce of like nothing. Just boom on the grill, on my plate, in my mouth. And I will still love it. Like, I think steak is so amazing on its own. And it's probably the only meat fishes with it, but like steak, like yeah, I like some salt, pep, but I don't really need a lot. Chicken, barbecue, sauce.
I should take some of those. Right.
And the sauces to go with the chicken.
I was wondering what that pancake mix
They'll
looking
chuck me out
was.
of the...
Now you're the Duke, they can't throw you out.
It's my household, isn't
Yeah.
it? So, Is that bread sauce? Or bready sort of?
No, it's actually made with ground almonds.
So it's nut. It's a nut-based.
It is. Almonds appear quite a lot in high-status cookery books as being a means of thickening. This is a very simple sauce, which is basically ground almonds immersed in some water for a short time and then sieved, and then with the stock from the chicken added to make a sauce. So I've mentioned cookery books in this context. We do have some cookery books from the end of the 14th century. The earliest cookery book in English is known as The Form of Curry.
The form of curry?
Yes, it has nothing to do with chicken tikka masala and everything to do with curry being an Old English word meaning to cook. So it's a
really?
form of cooking, and it was written by the chief cook to Richard II.
So the provenance of it, we know that
Yes.
that was the highest of status.
Yes. The cookery book was for the Lord, whoever he was, to have in his library, to say, here's another book I've got in my library.
I mean, I'm sure people wouldn't go through a lot of trouble making a cookbook for the poor people. I'm sure any cookbook you would find from way back then wouldn't be like a mother's cook. It would be like a really
about the things that my
high
cook
class.
has made for me.
Right, so it's almost a record of how sophisticated he
Yes.
is, even if you can't see the food.
Yes.
I mean, I imagine that problems like gout might have been an issue. I'm not sure whether
Well,
that's
see,
true, but...
You just have to consider Henry VIII. And once he stopped jousting,
Stop doing all the physical work, but
Yes.
continue to eat as
He
prodigious amounts he did.
yes, he continued to eat huge amounts of meat, lots of refined white bread, lots of sweet pastries and tarts, and very little in the way of...
And for a tall man, he became very wide.
He
I've seen
did.
his armour, and it's quite prodigious. He must have been a ferocious warrior, but he was probably quite an angry man, because if you're a sports person, then you can't do your sports.
Yeah.
You continue to eat. Nobody was going to tell him, just chill out, Henry, because he didn't have any friends like that.
Chill out.
He would have just been able to do what he wanted, and he could command whatever food he wanted when he wanted. Give me more sweet stuff.
And imagine, like, Henry, you need to lose some weight. He's like, I'll lose weight for you right now. I was going to make a good chopping head off joke, but it failed. I'll help you lose 10 pounds. I don't know how much a head weighs. Never mind.
Give me more food.
Yeah.
Wow.
Shut it.
The way food is presented and what it means and what it's made of has changed so radically from the medieval period to the fighting person of today. This is the contents of a British Army 24-hour ration pack. It provides all the calories and all the nutrients that a fighting soldier might need in 24 hours. It's very different to what a medieval person would have eaten. There's a lot more packaging for a start. There's arguably a lot more science gone into this. In the medieval period, they had the humours, they had the hot and the cold, the wet and the dry. We've got vitamins and minerals and all sorts of other things, balanced proteins and carbohydrates here. They didn't understand that way in the medieval times, but arguably from my perspective, I would prefer to eat the medieval food because I like my wholemeal bread and I like my mushy peas and I like my salmon fried in butter. That's all lovely, but it is inconvenient.
Let's do
Of all the jobs
beating a Roman gladiator. Did I like the last video? I didn't. Okay.
Of all the jobs in ancient Rome, gladiator was probably one of the worst. Low life expectancy, you lived most of it in a cell, and you had a pretty monotonous diet. Mostly a porridge, or pulse, of barley and beans. So thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video as we enter the Colosseum and dine as gladiators.
For some reason, when was like the... No. Of course they didn't have steroids. When was the first performance-enhancing thing made? Ooh, a Machoke. Cool Pokemon. Could never get him a champ because you had to trade it. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, because I'm assuming, like, people betted on people. Like, people had an interest in a gladiator winning or a chariot team winning or whatever. And so I wondered if they, like, gave them extra meat or something. Like, if they had someone go and, like, hey, give them extra meat so they're better prepared.
This time on Tasting History.
Big boy.
Recent archaeological evidence shows that a gladiator's diet was mostly vegetarian, at least on the day-to-day. And unfortunately, there are no recipes left to us for a gladiator's meal. But we can reconstruct one using the writings of Galen. Galen, who is one of the most famous physicians from the ancient world, spent quite a bit of time stitching up gladiators, and he wrote about their diet. There is also much use made of fava beans. Our gladiator
216. Isn't that like Marcus Aurelius age or similar time?
Wrote about their diet.
I don't know.
There is also much use made of fava beans. Our gladiators eat a great deal of this food every day, making the condition of their body fleshy. Not compact, dense flesh like pork, but flesh that is somehow more flabby. Why do I feel a little attacked by that? Anyway, having that extra layer of flab might have actually been a good thing when your job entailed people stabbing at you. Because, you know, you could bleed a lot, give the people a spectacle, but you're not endangering your vital organs. Galen goes on to say that these beans made the gladiators unusually flatulent, and that it was usually served as a porridge with barley, what the poet Juvenal called the hotchpot of the gladiator. And Pliny the Elder backs this up by saying, barley is among the oldest human foods, and the name given to gladiators who used to be called hordeari, barley men. So between these writings and actual recipes for fancier porridges or pulse by Apicius and Cato the Elder, we can kind of reconstruct what this gladiatorial pulse might have been like. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 cup or 150 grams of dried fava beans, 1 cup or 100. What you'll need is 1 cup.
Oh, they sort of look like giant ticks, like deer ticks. Ugh.
Or 150 grams of dried fava beans, 1 cup or 170 grams of barley. Best if you can find hulled barley for this, but if you can only find pearl barley, is more common. Just cook it for half as long. It's going to be a little bit mushier, but pretty much the same. 1 quart or 1 liter of water, 1 onion chopped, 3 cloves of garlic pressed. For as Varro says, ubi allium, ibi Roma. Where there is the smell of garlic, there is Rome. 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Now this is going to make a decent amount of pulse, which is required, for Seneca writes that for gladiators...
I bet you Rome smelled pretty good, except for the poop. Or they had sewage systems, right?
To withstand the blows and kicks of several opponents at once, and to such a degree that a man can last out the day and resist the scorching sun in the midst of the burning dust, drenched all the while in his own blood, must have copious food, copious drink, copious quantities of oil. But I'm not doing any of that stuff, so I'm probably not going to be finishing this entire thing of pulse, also because I just made a meal from today's sponsor, HelloFresh. And to keep with the vegetarian theme of gladiator...
Guys, please, if this interests you, make sure to use this guy's link, all right? Tasting History with Max Miller. Helps him out.
Cuisine, I have opted for one of HelloFresh's many vegetarian options. They have meals for every diet, pescatarian, low-cal, carb-smart, and even pizza if you're on that very strict pizza-only diet. We've tried many of their meals, and every single one we've loved. Today we tried the pasta primavera delivered to the door with fresh zucchini, bell pepper, and pea.
My favorite kind of pasta, the bow ties. I forget what it's called. But that's my favorite pasta. Did I say salad? I don't know why. It's just, it looks really good. It's easily forkable. and it looks good, and it's taste and
These meals are a great way to save time because 1, you don't have to go to the grocery store, and 2, they arrive to your door pre-portioned in sustainable packaging. Less food waste and a reduced carbon footprint. Honestly, between the shopping and the measuring, by the time I get around to cooking dinner, especially if I've been cooking all day for the show, I'm usually exhausted and I give up. But with HelloFresh, that's all done for me. So it's just 30 minutes of cooking and dinner is served. A delicious dinner, I might add, and a healthier and fresher alternative than takeout. So go to HelloFresh.com and use my code TastingHistory14 to get 14 free meals plus free shipping. 14 free meals, people!
Get it.
Just using my code TastingHistory14 at HelloFresh.com. But until you order, it's gladiatorial pulse for you. So first, soak the barley and the beans in cool water overnight. Once they're soaked, remove the peel from the fava beans, or you can just buy them pre-peeled, it's a lot easier. Now the order of these next things are kind of up to you, but if you want to do it all in one pot, add the olive oil and the onion to the pot, coating the onion in the oil, then set over medium heat and cook for 5 minutes or until the onions are translucent. Then carefully add the water to the pot and bring to a boil. Note that
I thought that whenever you put water on oil, it goes like goes everywhere.
if you've used too much oil and you pour water onto it, it can kind of spatter, and so be careful. If you want to completely eliminate that step, you can make the onions outside of the pot and then add them in later on. Once the water is boiling, add in the barley and cook for about 30 minutes. Then add the fava beans, the salt, the wine vinegar, and the garlic, and stir. Then cook this down into a thick porridge for about 30 minutes or so. Now, I don't know when a meal like this became the standard cuisine for gladiators, but Livy tells us that the first gladiatorial games were organized in 264 BC during the First Punic War by two brothers, Marcus and Decimus Brutus. They did this to honor their father at his funeral, and gladiatorial games often accompanied funerals. In 216 BC, the sons of consul Aemilius Lepidus honored his death with 22 fights held over 3 days. Basically, if Dad had to die, he wasn't going alone.
Right?
But what exactly was...
kind of like... Who was it? Was it Genghis... Oh, it was in like the Genghis Khan... I forget who it was. Who I was learning about. But like his father died. So like he had the father... Or like his son died. So he had the son of a bunch of father... It's like, Jesus Christ. Maniac.
What was life like for one of these gladiators? Well, as our porridge bakes and you hit that like button, provided you're entertained.
Are you not entertained?
Yes, I am,
Let's take a look
sir.
at the life of an ancient Roman gladiator. So you're a gladiator. Congratulations and my condolences, because your life expectancy is frighteningly low, about the age of 27. But that rather short life is going to be very exciting as long as you like fighting, because
27, so I'd be dead for 2 years?
Age of 27.
Okay, I'd be dead already.
But that rather short life is going to be very exciting as long as you like fighting, because that is what you're going to be doing most of the time, mostly for practice. See, as a gladiator, you'd belong to a ludus, or gladiatorial school. Some of the gladiators might be captives of war, or ludus, or gladiator...
That's pretty cool. You see how... That's pretty cool. Look how they're all kind of attached by a wooden pole that has two harnesses on each side, so you can never really run away. And that's a good training thing. Was it there for training or so they couldn't get away? No, training. Look at all the bars. That's a good tool.
Gladiatorial school. Some of the gladiators might be captives of war or criminals, and many choose to be there either as a way to pay off debt or because they just like killing things. But it does matter how you got there, because according to the poet Juvenal, net throwers aren't required to mess with convicted felons. Even the lowest scum of the arena observe this rule. Even
net throwers aren't required to mess with convicted felons.
in prison, they are separate.
Net throwers aren't required to mess with convicted felons. Even the lowest scum of the arena observe this rule. Even in prison, they're separate. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, you know, like I'd imagine that as the I don't know if it started as this, but as the gladiator games went on, that like people went to search, just like if they went and to get like lions and tigers or whatever they wanted to put in the ring. I'm sure they wanted the meanest looking, largest lion or tiger, and I bet they did the same with humans. Like when they went, this is all I have no idea. I'm just thinking. Okay, I have no evidence. Of like going around and seeing captives of armies and seeing like a big, huge guy of being like, get him. He's on my team or on my sponsor. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if they saw like really huge guys. They'd be like, oh my God, that would draw a big crowd into the arena.
And essentially it is a prison of sorts, because you spend all of your time in a cell unless you are eating or fighting. Gladiators were slaves to the lanista, or the owner of the school, and to him you must vow to endure to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. And right off the bat, I'm out. But if you do choose to stay, and you're good, then it's not all bad. Because Galen talks about unctores, or slaves that are in charge of basically making sure that the gladiators are nice and comfortable and receive daily massages before heading back to their cell.
What kind?
So between the massages, the exciting cuisine, and the hours of training, your lanista has made quite an investment in you, and he's going to get a return on that investment. And he's going to do that by renting you out. First option, the army. In 69 AD, the year of 4 emperors, which we talked about in the episode on Vitellian peas, the Emperor Otho's defenses included an irregular force of 2,000 gladiators, a shameful assistance of which during the civil wars even strict generals availed themselves. So it wasn't really looked well upon to have gladiators in your army, but it did happen quite a lot, though it tended not to go well for the gladiators. So instead of fighting an actual battle, you might be better off fighting an entertaining battle at a dinner party. The Romans would invite their friends to dinner, and when they were all sated with dining and drink, they called in the gladiators. No sooner did one have his throat cut than the masters applauded with delight. Bravo! Charming, just charming. Though a description from the consul Silius Italicus paints a rather more gruesome picture. Often the combatants fell dead above the very cups of the partygoers, and the tables were stained with streams of blood. That's why I never sit in the splash zone. Now, the other activity that you might be employed in as a gladiator, and probably the most famous, is to participate in the games, fighting in an arena like the Colosseum, which, by the way, I just finished putting together the Lego Colosseum. And as a huge Lego fan, it was pretty cool to get to put this together. It's the biggest set they've ever done. And
oh, really? That's cool. I'd like to do Legos. I always wondered, I'm like, every time I see in movies or just in or in TV shows or documentaries, I'm like, I always see the Colosseum and all of these structures at the bottom, and I'm like, what the heck is that? How do you have a gladiator match in a maze? But I guess that's like the under. So this right here would be all the way across, and that was just like the below deck, like where you'd keep the animals and the crew, I guess. It's sort of like a big play, you know?
And as a huge Lego fan, it was pretty cool to get to put this together. It's the biggest set they've ever done, and it really made me want to go back to Rome, so someday. Now, most gladiators only participated in these fights 3 or 4 times a year, so it wasn't a daily occurrence. But since you had a likelihood of dying in about 1 out of every 5 games, the odds, not great. But the night before the big fight, you got a nice fancy meal. A cena libera was a sort of feast where the combatants were given all sorts of...
Is it just me, or is 1 in 5 better odds than I thought you would have?
Food and drink.
I thought it'd be like 1 in 2 at best.
In a public place as a way to gin up excitement for the next day. Though several writers say that the gladiators tended to actually focus on spending time with their family and setting their affairs in order rather than gorging themselves. But it's up to you. What's not up to you is whether or not you fight, because you're gonna fight. It was compulsory. Though, unless you're a condemned criminal and opening the games by having to fight a tiger or another wild beast, the editor or the producer of the games would typically pair you up with someone that you at least had a decent chance against, so that's good news. There were many times another wild beast, the editor or the producer of the games would typically pair you up with someone that you at least had a decent chance against, so that's good news. There were many types of gladiator who were trained to fight with different weapons and equipment. And there was a way of pairing them up so that in theory there was no one type that overpowered another, unlike Batman versus Superman, because it's Superman versus Batman. How that movie lasted 3 hours, I don't know. I know it's been a long time, but I'm still upset about that. Also, like Batman vs. Superman, your fight would be set to a musical score. There would often be music played during the fight, including horns blasting out each time a blow was hit. Now, one way to win, of course, was to kill your opponent, but that happened less than you might think. Namely because if you died, then the editor or the producer would have to pay your lanista quite a bit more, like 50 times more than what he paid to rent you. Kind of like if you rent a car and destroy it and didn't get insurance. Same thing.
Okay.
So instead of dying, if you were bested, you could raise your fingers up in surrender, or the gladiator may lower his weapon and test the pity of the people. And pity was usually given. Not always, but usually. An arbiter, who was usually the editor, or if the emperor was there, then it was him, would be the one who decided if you lived or died, though they would often take into account the voice of the people. When the thumbs of the rabble are turned up, let any man be killed to court the mob. So it wasn't actually a thumbs down that sealed your fate, but a thumb in general, just kind of waving around, we don't exactly know. It was called the pollice verso, or turned thumb, and if they wanted you to live, then they just hid their thumb. So you want to see this out there. But if indeed it was your time to go, you had to do so honorably. The gladiator, no matter how faint-hearted he has been throughout the fight, offers his throat to his opponent and directs the wavering blade to the vital spot. The vital spot being the jugular. Though while this noble death was the ideal, it didn't always happen that way. There was a story of 5 retiari, or gladiators with nets, who yielded to 5 secutores, who fought with short swords and shields. And unfortunately for the retiari, the audience flipped them the thumb. But when their death was ordered, one of them caught up his trident and slew all the victors. Caligula bewailed this in a public proclamation as a most cruel murder. And when Caligula calls you cruel, caught up his for the retiari, the audience flipped them the thumb. But when their death was ordered, or gladiators with nets, who yielded to 5 secutores, who fought with short swords and shields. And unfortunately for the retiari, the audience flipped them the thumb. But when their death was ordered, one of them caught up his trident and slew all the victors. Caligula bewailed this in a public proclamation as a most cruel murder.
He cheated!
And when Caligula calls you cruel,
you were supposed to die. What?
But if you did live,
cheater,
you got to basically be a celebrity. Roman children had figurines made of their favorite gladiators, and gladiator sweat could be sold as an aphrodisiac, so it's no wonder that they were very popular with the ladies. Graffiti in Pompeii calls out, "The girl's idol, Celidus the Thracian gladiator."
That looks like that looks like a 3-year-old druid. My writing's terrible too, but jeez. Or maybe it was a...
Fought 3, won 3, and Crescens, the netter of young girls by night. Noble women would often pay to have the winner of a fight spend the evening with them at their villa, and the poet Juvenal writes of Hippia, a senator's wife who runs off with a gladiator to Egypt. Though he questions why she's willing to throw away her reputation and forsake her children, her husband, and her home.
Look at them
abs. The gladiator
abs.
was maimed in his limbs and verging now to age. Add the husband and her home. For the gladiator was maimed in his limbs and verging now to age. Add that his face was battered and decayed. The helmet on his brow huge sores had made. A wart deformed his nose of monstrous size, and foul discharge trickled from bloodshot eyes. But then he was a gladiator. That alone made every charm and every grace his own. A lid to every pot, I suppose. Though most of the ancient writers didn't seem to hold gladiators in very high regard.
It was just like, the more messed up you look, the more proof of how badass you were in the arena.
I suppose. Though most of the ancient writers didn't seem to hold gladiators in very high regard, no matter how much they won. Tacitus bemoaned the fact that his students were always talking about them during his lectures, and Calpurnius Flaccus said, "There is no meaner condition of..."
Yo, man, you see that gladiator match last night? Nah, I couldn't go. Shut up, you're in class.
Among them during his lectures, and Calpurnius Flaccus said, "There is no meaner condition among the people than that of the gladiator." And Seneca writes in what sounds a bit like sour grapes, "How many men, I say to myself, train their bodies, and how few train their minds? What crowds flock to the games, spurious as they are and arranged merely for pastime? And what solitude reigns where the good arts are taught? How feather-brained are the athletes whose muscles and shoulders we admire." Just like how the football team at my high school got all the funding, even though it was our choir that were the state champs. The jocks get everything.
Who the hell cares about the choir, dude? The football team gets all the funding. The choir won state championships. Crickets. Sorry.
Nothing has changed in 2,000 years, and maybe I'm the one with sour grapes. Now, if you do live through enough bouts in the arena, you may be lucky enough to be presented with a rudis, or wooden sword. It was the same type of wooden sword that you would have used to train back at your ludus, but if it was presented to you on the sand in the arena, that meant you were free. It was like giving a sock to Dobby.
Dobby is free.
Though many who received this freedom ended up going back to the
This I forget where it was like pitch meeting or something like that. That made something hilarious. It's like, you're telling me the entire time he was a servant, he never once got tossed laundry? Like, I'm home here, Dobby, and just threw it at him? Sorry. Okay. Loophole. Kinda.
Though many who received this freedom ended up going back to the ludus either to keep fighting or more often to train others, because what else are you going to do?
True.
Now, there were multiple times in Rome's history where they tried to put an end to the games, but it seems that the final straw came on January 1st, 404 AD, when a Christian monk named Telemachus had had enough.
And was killed, wasn't he?
After gazing upon the combat from the amphitheater, he descended into the arena and tried to separate the gladiators. The sanguinary spectators, possessed by the demon who delights in the effusion of blood, were irritated at the interruption of their cruel sports and stoned him who had occasioned the secession. The Emperor Honorius was so upset by this that he named Telemachus a martyr and put one final official end to the games, though they probably actually kept going on, but not officially. So that's the life of your average gladiator. But this Friday on Drinking History, I'm going to be talking about some of your less average gladiators, including emperors and women. And I'll be making a drink that the gladiators were, including emperors and...
Look at this guy. Okay, all right.
And I'll be making a drink that the gladiators were famous for. But for now, it's back to our gladiator pulse. So once the pulse has cooked down, dish it up and serve. And here we are, barley and bean pulse for a Roman gladiator. It's not the prettiest dish I've ever made, that's for sure. Kind of looks like oatmeal,
with apple.
Very mild color, but
oatmeal with
smells
apple
good, so let's give it a shot. Very garlicky. Not too garlicky, but garlicky. It's not half bad. There's that hint of sweet from the onion, but the garlic is definitely the most dominant flavor. You know, there's not a lot of flavor to barley or the beans, so they're just like an avenue for whatever else you put in here. I like the garlic because I like garlic. I might even put more garlic in, but anything that you put in here, that's kind of what the flavor is going to be. I think I did a very good job. I'm not gonna lie. Be careful not to oversalt this. This could become very salty very quickly. The thing is, this is a side dish. This is not an entire meal. I mean, it was an entire meal. This is all that they ate, but I don't know if I could eat like huge bowls of it for every meal. I think that would get very, very monotonous, but you know, that's how it was, the life of a Roman gladiator.
You ever try, like, sometimes I tell myself, I just spit on this. Like trying to be healthy, just like eat oatmeal. And oatmeal, and it's good, and I'll do it. Like, oh yeah, I could eat this like every day for breakfast. Then like the third day, you're really getting tired of oatmeal, and I think that might happen with that.
So thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Tasting History with Max Miller, and check out our Reddit and our Discord. I'll put the links in the description, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
Very cool. All right, guys, check out my Discord as well, or description. Really cool. Some food videos. And I think I'm just going to group them all together into one video and put it up. Do a little experiment. Hope you're all doing well. If not, chin up. You'll be good soon. Don't worry. See you guys next time. Check out these videos. I'm sure they're like thumbnail. Bye, guys. Love y'all. See you next time. Bye.